What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fourth album by Sugar Ray. Basically, this album is self-titled and it came out in the spring of 2001. So Sugar Ray had a pretty good high in 1999 with 1459. They got a series of top 10 singles and it was a pretty dominant album, especially throughout the summer of 1999. They crested 1999, 2000. There's still songs that you can hear on the radio today like Someday and Every Morning and some of those type songs. This was a real massive kind of hit. But I would have to say this album is kind of more lackadaisical. It kind of keeps the same pop rock kind of summer tunes, kind of summer resort type tunes of 1459, but it's just a more lackadaisical approach. They don't have as much. This album does not have the sheer crestability of 1459, but it is, I would say it's a better album than 1459, just without the commercial fanfare. There's a lot of songs on here that are crafted perfect for resort fare, vacay fare, that type of stuff, vacations, some of those type atmospheres. This would be a good 1-2 punch to pick up if you want to get some Sugar Ray. I would get 1459 and Sugar Ray self-titled just because both of these are pretty good soundtrack to summer as far as that kind of goes. This is the more relaxed and a lot more lackadaisical album between 1459. It's basically a carbon copy almost of 1459, just without the chart heaviness. But I would say that this is probably the better album. It's just interesting. That same malaise that they had on 1459 is here, but it just kind of impacts, or I feel like they're just not as hooky this time. I feel like the singles on this particular album just were good, but did not have the sheer crestability and this earworm kind of cognizance that they did on 1459, which is just kind of the thing. I look after it like the Every Morning and Someday and Falls Apart type songs were just, they had a little bit more affability, and it was kind of a relatively new kind of atmosphere just because when they made a song like Fly off of Floored from 1997, it was still kind of new, but for some reason, I don't want to say that they sound washed up this time, but they just don't sound as crisp as they did in 1999. But the thing about it is this is the better album. So it's this kind of, it's an awkward kind of juxtaposed kind of scenario where they're not quite as commercial. They're not quite as commercial, and they kind of somewhat lost their sweet spot that they had in 1999, at least as far as like crafting like hits in terms of like radio airplay. But this is still the better album. I feel like these songs are just better concentrated, more affable, and just have a lot more of like a more this somehow better quality. Like the things I remember complaining about with 1459 is they just didn't quite have as many album cuts, and they kind of ditched like the kind of summer kind of malaise type tunes of the singles. But this album doesn't do that. It's just chock full. It's basically like I was saying, like a whole summer vacation type album for just resorts and just kind of being on the beach of Florida or California, some of those type places as far as that kind of goes. Just real good. These are just two great albums for like June, July, August, just some sort of relaxation kind of luau type stuff as far as that kind of goes. But I just would look after it like, so yeah, we'll go ahead and talk about the singles on here just to kind of get into it, because I just would have to say it's just kind of like this is a quality album. I think this might actually be my most favored kind of Sugar Ray album as of this moment. I mean, it's interesting just because 1459 had the better popularity, but this one proves to me to be more the one that I would favor. And I think I am assuming that like the albums they did after their hit potential, because this album only went gold, so it didn't sell a million copies, wasn't multi-platinum like 1459 or Floored. But I would have to say that this album went gold, and everything after that, their 2003 album and their 2009 album just didn't reach this potential. But it's just kind of, I do feel like this is a pretty solid album. So we'll go ahead and talk about it. So the first single is When It's Over, and this is kind of a half-baked kind of vibes type tune. This really feels more half-baked than I was expecting from them. It's a good song, has good melodies on there somewhat, but it's just more lackadaisical. It's a lackadaisical version of this 14. It's a lackadaisical version of the 1459 singles. It's decent, but it's kind of standard. I feel like this is just kind of factory made, just kind of stock vanilla kind of summer haze as far as that kind of goes. Just another type tune that you would hear April, May, June, July, August, that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. I just feel like I would definitely have to say that the singles on 1459, like Every Morning and Someday, just hit that much heavier. They're just so much catchier, so much more charming, just have that affability. This one just feels really kind of through the motions and just kind of, I used to wonder like even like a week ago, or just the concept of me wondering why I never heard the singles when this album was a album that went gold, why I never heard When It's Over on the radio compared to like some of the singles off of, like hearing Fly or Every Morning or Someday or Falls Apart or some of those type of songs that you hear. But I kind of realize it now that it's just not quite as charming a song as like some of the stuff that they did in the 90s and such. But it is good. I mean, it charted pretty high. It was a top 15 single, but it kind of feels more through the motions and on autopilot than I was expecting. It's good. I'd probably give the song like a 6.75 or it's 7 at best in terms of the quality of it. I like it enough to recommend it, but it's not like a sure shot kind of wholesome victory. It's just kind of stock. But the second single is Answer the Phone, and this really gives me some Blink 182 vibes. It's interesting that they are kind of somewhat crossing over into punk territory because they were mostly kind of more surf oriented, kind of similar to Smash Mouth and folks like that. It's kind of, they were always kind of pop rock, but this one really feels like an emo and kind of moody tune. This is some mellow, kind of mid tempo makeshift. It's kind of an emo tune, and it just feels a lot more moody than expected. It just has like some nice moody kind of malaise about it. It's kind of interesting. It feels like something that most definitely this kind of has that relatively snappy mid-tempo kind of feel of like a Blink 182 type song, something like Adam's song, but not quite as moody as that. Just kind of one of those pick up the phone, I want to talk type tunes where you're kind of screwing up, but you have to bounce back, and that type concept as far as that kind of goes. Is this one that really, if I wouldn't have known prior, I would have almost said that this could have been a Blink 182 tune. This is very similar to that, but it didn't chart that heavily. This was not like a Billboard 100 single. It was in the bubbling under Billboard 100. So it's just kind of where this is why I think this is the reason why the album didn't go platinum, is because the lack of success of Answer the Phone, which is too bad. It's a good song. I might actually, I was going to say I like this song more than When It's Over, but they're both kind of just like B list kind of songs. It's kind of 7 out of 10, 80%, 75% kind of tunes as far as that kind of goes in terms of quality, but they're good enough to kind of be with it. But I just feel like they're good songs, but they're not like the jackpot kind of victories that I was expecting when they just had that crestability so well in 1999. But this is still the better album. That's what's so surprising about it. But these singles are just kind of they're not necessarily meh, but they're just not like I said, like jackpot kind of victories. So, but there's actually 4 singles on here, which the other 2 are Hours and Under the Sun, there are actually 2 other singles on here, which are Hours and Under the Sun, which Under the Sun Wikipedia doesn't even list as a single, but apparently it was one. So I'll talk about Hours first. This is kind of, Hours is the 3rd single. This is another one that didn't really chart at all. And this is kind of one that's more sleepy and dreamlike. It definitely reminds me of like a dreamlike type tune in the chorus and such. This really kind of feels cinematic in like the chorus, but it's just some mellow kind of summer haze. Definitely like the guitar licks on this song. Just really kind of like a breezy kind of summer bop. This very regular type song, and it's a ladies bop, but it's kind of dreary. I just would have to say it's just a very dreary type tune. A lot of these, all 3 of the singles kind of have that summer malaise about it. So they really realized that that's what people wanted from 1459. They really realized what succeeded off of 1459 and what people wanted, which was these more kind of lackadaisical kind of summer breeze type tunes. And they have it in spades, but they're just not. I mean, I do like Hours. I think that's probably one of my more favorite singles out of the bunch. I feel like Hours is just a good example. That one just has a little bit more pep, a little bit catchier than When It's Over, despite the fact that When It's Over kind of charted higher. But I feel like Hours is probably the better song. And Answer the Phone is just a decent bop. It's kind of middle of the road, just 75%, 80%. But I just would have to say. So then the other song is Under the Sun. I do like this single also. It's interesting that the singles that didn't chart were the ones I connected with more. But Under the Sun is kind of like the pseudo kind of 4th single. It's a reminiscing kind of track, very kind of mellow, kind of almost sullen type tune, just with the reminiscing, the way it kind of goes. This feels a lot more somber. And I would say like some of the songs off 1459 kind of had that. A lot of the singles off of 1459 kind of had that sprawling kind of solemnness kind of too, but this is one that really kind of has like a reminiscing type pitch towards it, just kind of kick back and reflect and that sort of thing. It's a reminiscing track with some lazy summer malaise attached to it. I would have to say it's just a relaxing kind of laid back kind of acoustic tune, and this works pretty well. I just really like some of these. I like all 4 of the singles, but it's kind of tough to figure out as to why they just were not quite as concocted as well as the ones off of 1459, which is just strange because for this to be the better album, you would think that the singles would have been outstanding, but it just was kind of, I don't know if they necessarily pulled their punches or they just kind of were if they just half-assed it on purpose, just paying attention to that. It's not so much that they're bad, but they're just not. I think that that's this kind of thing. I like Hours and Under the Sun, but those songs I don't really see as much of having like the chart potential. I think those would have been decent kind of third and fourth singles if the other singles had charted a lot better. But I don't know. I don't know if it's just I don't know if it's the combination that people were just kind of tired, which I really I don't think it's so much that people were tired of Sugar Ray as much as it was that just When It's Over was kind of underwhelming. And then also I would say Answer the Phone was kind of underwhelming. That the songs they were probably expecting something that had a little bit more kind of like fiery and feisty kind of appeal towards them, and they just didn't. I mean, they had the mellowness, and they definitely were some vacation type tunes as far as that kind of goes, but they were not like hook masters like they were in '99. So that's, but yeah, I could talk about this for a while, but that's just kind of the concept. So the four singles are good, but it's just kind of they're a lot more just lambent and like more dulled in terms of their quality, but they are good. I do like Hours and Under the Sun way better than the two singles that should have had the chart potential. But so there's 11 songs on this album, and out of 11, I wound up recommending 8. So that's really good. This is what I was talking about. This is better than how I felt about 1459, and I would probably say Floored too. I don't remember Floored as much, but that one kind of had Floored and Lemonade and Brownies kind of had more of like new metal type feels to them. I'm going to get to Lemonade and Brownies, but I would have to say that the concept kind of is they definitely don't have any new metal this time, but it's just kind of where I do think this is a pretty excellent album. So I'm going to say like the 8 songs I recommend would be When It's Over, Answer the Phone, Under the Sun, Satellites, Hours, Words to Me, Sorry Now, and Stay On. A lot of this album is pretty sleepy and drowsy, and there's a lot of songs just for like standard hop and bop throughout the summer, just day commute and day commerce as far as that kind of goes, whether it's just rendezvous or dates, stuff like that, just kind of out on the town and just kind of like a more day setting. One song I kind of feel like has some good summer pep that just has a little bit more spark to it. It's not quite as sleepy as Satellites. This is a summer heater for the ladies. Light guitar licks on the song, but it's just kind of a more offhanded and more relaxed version of a crunk cut where I feel like it has more pep than most of this album kind of does, but it still is relatively relaxed. Most of this album kind of has more acoustic guitars and just kind of light guitar licks. I mean, there's nothing really riff heavy, which I remember complaining about with 1459 that it just didn't work for them, but this one kind of does have some pep, but it's just kind of acoustic pep, so it's just kind of the thing about it. Kind of, it's a good pairing of a song for being out and about, and I kind of feel like another one that's kind of like an acoustic gem that works pretty well is Words to Me. This is like a sluggishly peppy kind of summer bop. This one just really feels commercial. This is some acoustic commercial as far as that kind of goes. It's a hop and bop kind of tune, and it's just kind of one for like some day commerce. I would definitely kind of say this is one that probably could have been a single if there had been like a fifth single or a fourth single that would have charted better. I would have definitely said this would have been a good choice. It just has like a lot of peppy kind of breeziness about it. This is just so lackadaisical. Feels like classic and vintage kind of Sugar Ray as far as that kind of goes. The stuff that they did on 1459 in this album is just real good. Kind of get that kind of pep about it. It's probably one of the most presentable songs on here, which is the most ready for radio. I feel like Hours, Words to Me, When It's Over, and like Under the Sun are all some good examples of just light, or just all good examples of some light guitar licks and kind of acoustic kind of commercial pep as far as that kind of goes. And Sorry Now is one that kind of ditches like the summer malaise and kind of more relaxed acoustic type feels. And it's kind of a thumping party cut. It's a venue track. This is definitely one I would play out and about. This is one of the few night-oriented songs on here. It's definitely not a day commerce kind of tune. It's lively, which is different from most of the stuff on this album. It's kind of a bubbler. This is probably one with the most spark and energy. This is definitely one of the few songs that kind of feels ready for like a Friday night, Saturday night type feel as far as that kind of goes. I would say this one's probably one of the ones that has the most pep. This would be a good angle. I like the concept where I do like this kind of, 1 o'clock in the afternoon kind of day commerce type feel. Most of the songs on this album, they have that commercial pep really mastered by this point. Between this album and 1459, but I do like seeing some of these night tunes. I would have liked a single. I think that would have definitely given that some liveliness. It's kind of getting like a night oriented. I don't know why they didn't do it. That probably would have been just the trick that they needed for this 2001 album. Would have been like a more kind of single crafted version of Sorry Now with just like some evening pep. I think that would have worked, but it didn't happen. This is a good song. Then Stay On is a nice one. Stay On is another nice one. This is a halfway breezy kind of summer malaise kind of tune. It's a lackadaisical kind of warm day charmer, and it's just relaxed out and about. Where I feel like this is another one where you can be out and about with it, but it just kind of has like more like typical of most of this album. It's kind of more relaxed, kind of central kind of tune, just regular kind of afternoons out, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock type feels as far as that kind of goes. Typical kind of regular summer afternoons type stuff as far as that would kind of happen. I think it's just another class act one, but it fills out the album. I feel like all 8 of these songs, minus like maybe Sorry Now, are basically just crafted for like lazy kind of lackadaisical summer days as far as that kind of goes. Just a perfect little album. It's probably what 1459 needed to be, just without the hit singles and the sheer fury of like the craftability of the marketability that the 1459 album had. It's just the better album, definitely has a lot more. They got a trade and they nailed it extremely well, but it doesn't have the sheer marketability of like 1459, which as a result, the album only went gold. And then they just kind of faded into obscurity after that, which is too bad. I don't know why that happened. If they had just had another hit, if they had saved on to some of their songs, maybe they could have had some songs that they wrote in 1999 that they held on to, something like that. It's odd that they lost like their hook potential just 2 years later, because they had singles throughout 1999 and they just briefly took the year 2000 off, and somehow it just didn't turn out quite as well. But that's just kind of the thing. I look after this album is better. Like I said, it's better. I'm gonna give this album me liking 8 songs out of 11 on here. I'm gonna give this album me liking 8 songs out of 11 on here. I'm gonna give this album an 8.75 out of 10. To talk about the 3 songs I didn't enjoy, which were just talk about the 3 songs I didn't enjoy on here, which is just Waiting, Just a Little, and Disaster Piece. These all kind of have like a more country makeshift type feel about them that just don't really suit Sugar Ray quite as well. I mean, they kind of dipped into reggaeton a little bit, but this is kind of a new interesting kind of angle that they try out this time, but this doesn't quite work as well. I think country makeshift, maybe. I know that there's certain artists that can probably pull it off. I can't think of ones that pulled it off back in 2000, 2001, but I just didn't see the kind of the more country and country bar type tunes working quite as well on this album. I just didn't see the quality behind it, but they do attempt it. They do try to blend some more genres this time, just in terms of like some country pop as far as that kind of goes. But I just didn't like the aspect of it. Just didn't quite work as well. But I would have to say 8.75 out of 10. In terms of social score, I'm going to give the social score like a 9.25 out of 10, because I feel like there's quite a few tunes on here that have quite a bit of social pop. Like this whole album is just like a summer treat as far as that kind of goes. Just a lot of good summer makeshift kind of feels, just for some good June, July, August kind of days, and April, May type days, September even I would throw in, just that kind of concept as far as that kind of goes. But it just doesn't. I really could have used some nightlife tunes. I mean, most of this is just kind of 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just before the sun sets, and not quite as much party oriented type stuff, where it's just kind of bops and picnics and luau's and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. But it doesn't really have like the consensus of like beer drinking, going out to bars and karaoke type stuff, late nights and night kind of affairs. I think that could have desperately been something that this project needed, so especially in the single department. I just feel like all these singles just have such a kind of not necessarily despondent, but just kind of a lot more cathartic kind of feeling towards them, which is good. I feel like the quality, this worked better on 1459, but the singles just don't have the hook catchiness that they need, and I think that's why this album only went gold. But it does have better quality, so that's just kind of the thing. So it's odd. It's an odd concept, but in terms of the future, Sugar Ray has not dropped an album since 2019, which is too bad, just because I like some of these. I mean, I know that they're years and probably decades removed from their hit potential, but I just look after it. This is some good stuff on here, and this is pretty much, in my opinion, this might be their best album. And the only real thing that really stops it from being like a true knockout victory is just the singles just did not chart as well as they did on 1459. But apart from that, this is a pretty excellent album. 8.75 out of 10. Which I remember giving 1459 like a 6 or something like that. So this is far better. This is pretty much almost just a hair or two shy of being like a classic in terms of that.